Welcome back, everyone. This time, we will be covering one of the most twisted personalities in all of Nikke. Today's video will be over the character that spawned the beloved mascot of the Nikke community. You guessed it, Dorothy, otherwise known as Doro, within the Nikke community. We will be going over how one of the most genuine, prideful, and sophisticated heroes of the entire story fell from grace to become a scheming, spiteful mastermind who lies, twists, and distorts the truth, and will otherwise be willing to do any underhanded thing to achieve her ambitions. This will be another wild ride, so prepare as we dive straight on in. Dorothy actually started out as a fairly normal person. Her story starts in the stories of the Red Ash and Overzone events of the game, which take place respectively 100 years and 80 years before the start of the main story. I'm going to start with the events of the past, as it is most important to understand how much Dorothy has changed. The Dorothy the commander knows is very, very different from the Dorothy of the past. It all starts around 100 years into the past, after Dorothy was turned into a Grimm's model Nikke to join the Goddess Squad, who comprised some of the best and brightest saviors of humanity. She was the daughter of a very important politician. This, to some extent, explains much of her snooty, sophisticated, and high society-oriented personality. She was, and is, a very prideful individual who tends to look down on uncivilized or brutish behavior. She's always tended to be somewhat aloof and can sometimes see herself being above certain things or above certain people, though she has never tended to treat those she sees as below her badly. She can also sometimes be snooty and stuck up, which oftentimes leads to confrontations with more open-minded or more free-spirited individuals. Two individuals that I can reference for examples are Scarlet and Red Hood, as she often had little confrontations with them. She usually can always be found enjoying unique or exotic and overall very expensive teas. And she tends to be very particular in how they are brewed, as she typically wants them to be of the highest quality. These aspects of her, more or less, have not changed whatsoever the last 100 years leading up to the main story. However, other aspects of her have changed. In the past, despite not typically showing it, she cared a great deal for her squad mates, even though she often bickered and often fought with them constantly, like the many physical scuffles she got into with Scarlet and Red Hood, as well as the many verbal battles she and Red Hood would have. This wasn't always the case. We should preface this. It wasn't always the case. She only became more willing to become more familiar and friendly with her squad mates after she discovered that some of them had a few things in common with her. One of the most notable things is the fact that Scarlet was also a tea connoisseur, like Dorothy, who was very, very, very well versed in tea and how to brew it, along with the fact that she had some of the same exact taste in teas that Dorothy did. One of these was magnolia tea. They both drank it, and they once had a cup together, which brought them closer together. She also started to find some common ground with Red Hood as well. It should be noted that this never did anything to stop the bickering and little squabbles, though. Her intense care and love for her squad mates, however, became ever more pronounced and evident ever since the events of Red Hood becoming corrupted. As you all may well know from my story-based deep dives, corruption is a phenomenon where code is implanted into the nanomachines in a Nikke's brain and causes the Nikke to effectively become a slave to the Raptures. It's more or less a form of mind control that causes the Nikke to lose their true sense of self, becoming an enemy to their former allies. This forces them to either die by their allies' hands, or sometimes it can kill them outright. It is a terrifying and gruesome thing. When Red Hood was corrupted, it brought many members of the squad closer together, as they were forced to deal with corruption firsthand with one of the ones they cared the most about. It was apparent Red Hood was dying. Many members of the squad had to cope with this. Dorothy, while she may never show it, was one of the ones most deeply affected, because her and Red Hood, despite constantly bickering and fighting, cared for each other a great deal. Dorothy did not want to see her go. Red Hood was nearing the end of her life, and the corruption was causing more and more side effects. It wasn't just the red eyes anymore. Red Hood was losing some of her motor functions, and at times, even her ability to speak properly. This was going downhill, and it was slowly becoming harder to deal with, most of all for the squad, other than just Red Hood. Now, while it's sad to admit, Red Hood was resigned to her fate, despite her allies trying everything in their power to never give up and to urge her to fight back with all that she was. She was resigned to her fate. Felt she destined to die. At one point, however, Dorothy even snapped at her about it. And when it came down to it, and Red Hood asked if one of them could or would execute her on the spot, when her time came and the corruption became too much, it was quite obvious that the cold Dorothy would not be able to go through with it. And this was even pointed out by Red Hood herself verbally when she said that none of them could do it. This ultimately ended in Red Hood leaving the squad and she was ultimately presumed dead. A very, very depressing turn of events for all of them, even more so for Dorothy. After these events, when Red Hood was presumed dead, Dorothy was quite a bit colder in regards to her. Dorothy often referred to Red Hood as someone who abandoned them being the Goddess Squad. Later on, however, the squad was meant to track down and fight off the heretic known as Anichiro, who so happened to be Cinderella after she was turned into a heretic. It is around the time that they are engaging Anichiro that Red Hood returns in quite the spectacle, no less. It is quite obvious that Dorothy was very happy about the return of Red Hood, incredibly surprised that she was even alive several weeks after the time of her leaving. To recap, Red Hood was already severely suffering from the effects of corruption. It was expected that she did not have much longer to live. So this was a huge surprise, and Dorothy was quite happy about it. They engage the heretic Anichiro together and eventually suppress her and defeat her. Afterwards, Red Hood says her goodbyes once again. This time, when Red Hood is leaving after the battle, Dorothy was the only one who tried to get her to stay, showing how much she cared for Red Hood, but she ultimately accepted Red Hood's departure. Fast forward 20 years to the events of Overzone. It has become quite obvious that Dorothy is somewhat different from the events of Red Ash. She's a little more wary and downtrodden, as she has been through several ordeals since that time. During the events of Overzone, however, she is still virtually the same exact person from 20 years ago, minus the sadness from the death of Lily Weiss and the supposed death of Red Hood. Because in the time since Red Ash, Lily Weiss has died and Red Hood has left and has also supposedly left this world. This has resulted in her becoming the leader of the Goddess Squad, since Lily Weiss and Red Hood are no longer with them. And the legendary commander is now also residing in the Ark, no longer able to command the squad. She has become quite a bit softer and more warm to the squad during these times that she is squad leader. In the events of Overzone, it is her mission to lead the entire operation, known as Ark Guardian. This operation is an effort to seal off the Ark, and during the 4+ months that it takes to seal off the Ark, it is her duty to lead the Goddess Squad, and only a few hundred Nikkes, which amounts to little more than a handful of the Ark's forces, in an effort to defend the main gate of the Ark, which is now being sealed. And she has to do this with virtually zero extra backup or supplies other than what they have on hand at the beginning of the operation. Not long into the operation, they start to encounter difficulties and trials. Eventually, the majority of mass-produced Nikke forces are close to total annihilation, and it has become clear that they are getting no extra backup. On top of this, they have lost several major facilities that the squad requires to function and maintain the camp supporting the defense of the Ark. It starts to take a heavy toll on the squad's morale. Dorothy is the one glue holding them all together at this moment in time, including but not limited to Snow White, who has already gone through a mind switch, Scarlet, who has become quite the drunkard, and Rapunzel, who is taking it all the hardest, as Rapunzel finds it hard to cope with the deaths of all her Nikke compatriots. She is the kind of individual who intends to match up to Lillyweiss and be the leader of the goddess squad who takes the sole burden of it all upon herself. Thus, she decides to step up and pull them all together after these stepbacks, deciding to take charge and lead them into the future of this operation. Eventually, only one mass-produced model is left among the goddess squad's reinforcements, a Nikke named Pina. She was a strong-willed individual who was the one to stand up and made her voice heard when the goddess squad started quibbling and was beginning to fall apart at the seams. Through her outspokenness, she unintentionally became one of them in the eyes of the squad. More so than ever in Dorothy's eyes. She became a close friend to all of them. And closest of all to Dorothy. Dorothy really admired her strong will and her determination in the face of all that they were up against and the immense, arduous task at hand. However, all good things came to an end very, very abruptly. One day, when a horde of raptors attacked, while everyone was out scavenging, save for the lone Dorothy and Pina, tragedy struck. Dorothy was intent on showing herself off to Pina and being the goddess of victory that Pina saw in her. It was through this decision that she decided that while Pina stayed back and fired the signal flare, she would challenge them all by herself. After taking down the whole horde by herself and launching a flare, however, little did she know that an exceptionally large rapture had snuck in from behind on the flank. Pina fought it off by herself to defend Dorothy. But in the end, in a true tragedy, she was inflicted with corruption. Dorothy, full of grief, was forced to end one of her closest friends, if not her closest friend's life, on the spot by shooting her through the head. After the squad saw the emergency signal flare, they came rushing back. They knew that the flare meant they had undergone a rapture attack. The squad returned, only to find Dorothy with a pistol that had no bullets, attempting to neutralize herself. Not long after she had neutralized Pina, this event had truly broken her resolve. A series of time passes with Dorothy being in a very depressive state. She's in this state for what can only be amounting as almost an entire week. However, sometime later on, Dorothy seems to miraculously recover from her mental health crisis when she leaves her room, and out of nowhere proceeds to announce the bombshell that the Ark had finally gotten in touch with the Goddess Squad on the surface. They were then given a mission to complete 3 objectives to ensure that the Ark could be sealed. And they decided, as a squad, that they would fulfill these objectives. All seems well at first. Yet, despite this, Snow White alerts the squad and tells them, aside from Dorothy, to be wary and to keep an eye on Dorothy, assumingly to make sure that she is okay. All seems well for an even longer period of time while they are fulfilling their objectives. Yet sometimes the sentences Dorothy would say or speak at times would seem to have tenses or refer to things that seemed a little bit off. But it doesn't seem like too big of a concern in the greater scheme of things. However, later on, this is turned upside down. Snow White pulls Dorothy aside after she comes to a conclusion from the reports of the rest of the squad's reports. She then proceeds to ask Dorothy if she's talking to Pina, to which Dorothy then says yes. However, Snow White concludes something, and the rest of the squad lets it go as is for some time, realizing that if they disrupt this new reality Dorothy is living in, which they saw as Dorothy's coping mechanism, it could cause her to lose her sanity or undergo a mind switch or even kill her outright. So they decide to let things be. After the mission was complete, however, and the squad decided to go their separate ways to fulfill their new mission of hunting down the Rapture's queen for the sake of humanity, Dorothy decided to stay in the Enclave, the camp to protect the Ark, with the Pina she thought was still alive. She stayed there for some time, as she saw this as her paradise. Dorothy had always dreamed of going to paradise with Pina, which is how she referred to them moving into the Ark. But that was no longer within reach after the betrayal the Ark had dropped on them at the end of the mission. They had been stabbed in the back. All of the Goddess Squad was under the impression that they would defend the Ark, which was the mission. The mission would succeed. They would then move into the Ark, and that they would be welcomed and hailed as heroes, and live their days in peace and happiness. This could not be further from the truth. As you can see at the end of the mission, Oswald told them that they could not enter the Ark, as it had been sealed, and that statues would be erected in their honor. But they were to live out their days on the surface and essentially be confined to the hell that is the surface. Dorothy wanted to destroy the Ark, destroy the door to the Ark, even threatened as much, and even went so far as to threaten Oswald's entire family bloodline. She did not follow through on this, however, or these threats, as her hero's pride, and pride in being a goddess of victory, would not let her do so. They could no longer enter the Ark. Thus, Dorothy saw this enclave outside the Ark, the basement to protect it, as a paradise they made for themselves. So she stayed. Things continued like this, day in, day out, day in and day out, until one day she visits Lily Weiss's grave. She solemnly remembers all that Lily Weiss was. She remembers the great times the squad had, the bickering, all of it. Then the specter of Pina comes along and starts talking with Dorothy. Pina is asking what kind of person Lily Weiss was, to which Dorothy answers with nothing but the highest of praise. At one point in the conversation, it drifts towards if Dorothy misses Lily Weiss, to which she replies no, because Lily Weiss had accomplished all she wanted in life and left this world with zero regrets. Then Pina asks about the coffin. It is at this point when Dorothy mentions that Scarlet carved the stone herself and reminisces that she also wanted to have one carved like this for Pina. As the sentence is leaving her mouth, she remembers that Pina is dead and cries all over again in anguish. She cries and cries, but at the same time thanks Pina for staying with her in her mind. And she concludes that it is the only thing that kept her sanity intact for so long. She attempts to leave the Enclave again, but still can't leave the Enclave. After several days, almost 2 weeks, the specter of Pina finally urges her to go, and she leaves. It is at this point she stumbles upon a road sign that is talking about the Ark. This is when she snaps. She declares that she will get revenge on the Ark, which took her wings from her and had robbed her of her trip to paradise. This becomes a turning point for her. It is at this point in her life that while the stuff she enjoys and small key aspects of her personality and taste stay the same, she becomes almost an entirely different person in many other regards. Her personality undergoes a paradigm shift, and she basically becomes the Dorothy that we know of today in the main story. Nearly 40 years pass, at which point Dorothy takes in Johann and Cecil from the Ark and founds the paradise known as Eden, a bastion of humanity, much smaller than the Ark, but much more technologically advanced, that resides on the surface rather than underground. Fast forward even further to the events of the main story. Dorothy meets the commander. When the commander finds his way to Eden after encountering Johann, it is clear at this point, nearly 80 years after the events of Overzone, that she, Dorothy, has become rather spiteful and cold. In talks with the commander during his stay, it comes up that she finds herself incapable of loving humanity and incapable of being loved by humanity, which she feels humanity threw her aside after it had used her during Operation Ark Guardian. The commander alludes to the fact that she is, despite how she is now, and despite what she's done and been through, that she is still capable of love and of being loved. It is after this point, however, at which point the commander finishes his mission and his business in Eden and decides to take his leave to return to the Ark. However, Dorothy keeps the Nikke Papillon behind almost as a hostage to further her own schemes. Dorothy sets up a commander to the Ark through Papillon, which serves Deputy Commander Birmingham personally. She arranges connections and talks of potential cooperation between Eden and the Ark through this use of Papillon. It is unclear what she is scheming at this point, as she supposedly despises the Ark and wants to destroy it, not benefit it. But that is left unclear at this point in time when these talks are ongoing because of the nature of what is happening in these talks. She is eventually, after some time, set to go to the Ark and meet with Birmingham. It is at this point, however, that Nihilister, the fire dragon, a heretic of great power whom the commander has fought in the past, invades the Ark. This is when things really start to heat up. The Ark's forces, namely the Counters, the biggest fighting force left in the Ark at the time, barely manages to fight the behemoth off, but are not even close to defeating her without using Vapaus. As things are getting more desperate, the commander contemplates using the Vapaus to get rid of her, or at least force her to retreat. This is much ill-advised by the Counters. It is at this point of desperation and tough choices, however, that Dorothy swoops in, just in the nick of time, and proceeds to down the fire dragon. She has seemingly saved the Ark. This puts a twist on most of what we know about her so far. You see, if what she wanted was to see the Ark destroyed, all she had to do was let Nihilister run rampant. That begs the all too important question: what is it that she actually wants? She proceeds to meet with Birmingham and facilitate talks with the deputy chief, and even proposes a deal that massively benefits the Ark, way more than it benefits Eden. And in return, one of the only things that she wants is a minor television channel to broadcast whatever she wants on it through the Ark. It becomes clear at this point that destroying the Ark may not be her ultimate goal. But it is clear she has some ulterior motive, if not multiple motives and desires. Her wishes are granted, and most importantly, the deal succeeds, providing the Ark with optical camouflage and a means to retake portions of the surface permanently. Aside from this, nothing else of much import has happened yet. It is clear she has ulterior motives, but nobody knows what they are. A brief overview so far. Dorothy went from someone who was, aloof and snooty, but overall could be friendly, To someone who's still possessive of the prior two qualities, but is much more darker and way more twisted than ever before. She does not seem inherently evil like the heretics who want to wipe out humanity, but neither does she care for humanity all that much either. She's become cold, cruel, deceptive, and overall malicious in nature. She is still capable of being friendly at times, but never with an intent to foster something deeper. She is at most neutral and at her worst openly hostile and scheming. Will she ever change for the better or undergo a shift again? If so, I will cover that in a part 2 video somewhere down the line. Whether it be, months or years, as we have about, 7 years of story rumored to go. Just a rumor. There is one more thing to note, however. I will point out again that while most of the events in the game with story chapters are not closely tied to the main story, they are all canon and happen at some point in the story, which brings me to the point I'm coming to. It is possible that Dorothy may be undergoing some changes, and it is possible her paradigm shift into what she is today, the almost evil boss queen, may be undone at some point in the future, and she may finally be able to heal and let go. In the most recent summer event on the cruise ship, while a lot of stuff happened, it's possible she may be changing for the better. Some of her past was finally brought to light to the commander and Rappy and the other Nikkes aboard the boat. After things were finally settled and Rappy and Dorothy were done with their scuffle, and things were finally resolved, there was a party thrown on the ship's deck. I would like to preface this cutscene we're about to show from said event and said party before I play it. It is noteworthy to point out that Dorothy has never once smiled from the heart, like a true smile, in the events of the main story after the commander has met her. All of her smiles have been either superficial, a cocky and derisive sneer or smirk, or a wicked smile after she gets something that she wants. There has not once been a smile fueled by true happiness. I want to point that out again. One more thing to say before I play it. Most of this clip is irrelevant, and it does have quite a bit of fan service for the fans of the community. But I want you to focus on the bits involving Dorothy, our pink-haired queen, who in this cutscene is wearing a pure white frilly swimsuit and has pink hair with flowery bun on the sides, typically. Keep a close eye on her, specifically the part at the end of the cutscene.
Candy bars ready for
As we can finally see, Dorothy has finally released a smile from the bottom of the heart at the end of that cutscene, not fueled by malice or spite. While there's still a long way to go, and while she may never be fully healed or let go of her hate of the past, it is definitely something to take notice of. Dorothy has been through a lot of pain and heartache in the past 100 years and has lost two people who were very precious to her, the second of which broke her to some extent. She has fallen quite far from the goddess of victory she once was, but it is not the end for her. And she may one day return to what she was. That is about it for the video. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Dorothy and want to see more videos like it over the various characters of the game, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as well as hit that bell for all notifications. I will continue to post at least one of these every 2 weeks, while aiming for one every week. We also do story-based lore deep dives on this channel as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Stay cool, crew.